Israel's prime minister is in the air right now on his way back from Moscow after a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Netanyahu is rushing back home so he can try and attend tonight's funeral for Sergeant Zachary Baumel, an IDF soldier who was killed in action, whose remains were just identified and returned to Israel yesterday after 37 years. Netanyahu is returning to Jerusalem with this flag-draped coffin. Inside is Baumel's backpack and uniform. Russia's returned Baumel's bones back to Israel only yesterday.
As you know, our military, together with our Syrian partners, found the grave of Baumel. We think that this is an act of humanity to allow his family to lay a wreath on his grave.
2 years ago, I came to you with a personal request to help us find the remains of missing soldiers, including Zachary Baumel. The request came from our common values in soldiery camaraderie. You responded yes immediately. You took it as a personal project, and you directed your servicemen who did an outstanding job.
And with me in studio is I-24 News defense correspondent Jonathan Regev. Jonathan, explain what we know about the timing of this discovery. This is a soldier who was missing for nearly 4 decades. I mean, how did Russia come across the remains? Now, when did they come across the remains?
It happened probably some time ago. The remains, Israel believed for some time, for many years actually, that the remains are in a cemetery located at the Yarmouk refugee camp inside Damascus, inside the Syrian capital. As long as this area was controlled by Syria, the Syrian regime of President Assad, Israel, of course, could not ask for their assistance. They would not assist. Of course, when that area was controlled by ISIS during large parts of the Syrian civil war, Israel could not ask for assistance. When did that change? When the Russian army came in. Once the Russian army took control of the area, that is when Israel approached Russia and asked for assistance, asked to look at some of the bodies in that cemetery in the Yarmouk refugee camp. The Russian army delivered that to Israel. Israel looked into many of those bodies, trying to identify them, and eventually one of them turned out to be the body of Zachary Baumel.
I understand that there were about a dozen or so remains in total, a dozen bodies, or the remains that were sent back to Israel. We know one has been positively identified as this fallen IDF hero. Do we know if any of the others are other missing IDF soldiers?
As far as we know, at this moment, there's one body which is still not been identified, and this of course raises the hope that it could perhaps be the body of one of the other 2 missing soldiers from that battle, Feldman and Yehuda Katz. There were 3 missing in action. Yeah. Now there are 2. All of those bodies, one has been positively identified as belonging to Zachary Baumel. The other one more body, is still unidentified. The others do not correspond to Israeli soldiers, and the hope is that at least for one family there is closure. Maybe for another one there will be closure as well.
All right, let's turn now to Moscow with Ivan Nechepurenko. Ivan is the Moscow correspondent with the New York Times. I want to ask about the meeting. A lot of it, of course, focused on this discovery of Sergeant Baumel. What does it say about the relationship between Putin and Netanyahu, perhaps even on a personal level, that Russia fulfilled this request to help out?
Well, certainly this speaks volumes about the personal relationship between the 2 men, because Putin is basically doing Netanyahu a favor at the moment when he needs all help he can get. And of course, if that will help him in Israel internally, Putin will want a favor back eventually, and I think that it is very wise to do that. I'm not sure if Russia offered this or if the Israeli side requested it at this moment, but the timing is the crucial thing here, of course.
Yeah, the timing, this was revealed 5 days before Israel's election. Do we know? Do you know? Is it up for? Are reporters talking about it there in Moscow about when Russia found this gravesite? When did they respond immediately? Was there any kind of delay? I mean, that raises a lot of questions.
Well, what we know here is that Russia has been doing it for a while. I think a tank was passed to Israel a few years ago from the same area. So it looks like Russia has been doing that, but this kind of symbolic ceremony that we saw today, the meeting, is what is essential, what is going to be reported, what we talk about today. This is what is important for Israeli, for voters in Israel.
And Ivan, this is the second now face-to-face meeting between the two men in as many months. Before then, they had a big falling out, a big diplomatic crisis after that September downing of a Russian military plane. Is the relationship starting to be repaired?
Well, it seems it has recovered completely. I think the plane incident is behind us, and it is an example of how these things can be left behind in case there's a mutual interest and mutual ways to benefit from a relationship. And it looks like this is what we see here on display, a mutual way to benefit from a very cordial personal relationship between the two men.
Yeah.